Good morning. Good to have you with us on a Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Great to be with you after a historic election in America. We have a lot to get to this morning. In the wake of the vice president's concession speech, we're beginning to get a picture of what a second Trump administration could look like as reaction from the world streams in.
We have a team of correspondents covering every aspect of this historic election. We begin with NBC's Garrett Hake in West Palm Beach, Florida, where the 45th president is now preparing to become the 47th.
Hey, Savannah, Joe, good morning. A big day for Donald Trump yesterday, a long day, and his first day as president-elect, declaring victory overnight yesterday. Yes, it was still yesterday. And then beginning the work of his presidential transition. He met with staff and allies yesterday, taking foreign leader calls throughout the day, including Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine, President Xi of China, also taking calls from Vice President Harris and from President Biden, who invited Trump back to the White House. That's all about ensuring that smooth transition of power. Now, we heard from Trump's two sons yesterday in interviews, although not Trump himself, kind of reveling in the victory and marveling at the inroads he was able to make politically all around the country with what looks like a new Republican coalition, or at least a new Trump coalition. He did better with working class Americans. He did better with young people. He did better with men. And he did especially better with Latinos. Now, we're going to see exactly how that plays out in some of these other races around the country that remain uncalled. There are some House races in places that we refer to as deep blue states where Donald Trump's performance may be enough to carry other politicians to victory. And the other fallout from yesterday's shockwave politically is the end of Donald Trump's criminal prosecutions. We have reporting from the DOJ that they are evaluating how best to wind down the remaining cases against Donald Trump, according to two people familiar with the matter, in keeping with the department's longstanding practice of not prosecuting a sitting president. So a lot to happen between now and January 20th, but that work of the transition really all across the federal government, not just here in Palm Beach, now underway in earnest. Joe, Savannah?
The day after yesterday. Garrett, thank you so much.
For her part, Vice President Kamala Harris addressed her supporters yesterday following her loss.
In the concession speech at her alma mater, Howard University in Washington, D.C., Harris tried to console Democrats. She reaffirmed her commitment to the Constitution and to a peaceful transfer of power and urged her supporters not to give up.
Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves.
NBC News correspondent Monica Alba joins us from Washington, D.C. Monica, good morning. So Harris packed a lot into a relatively short concession speech. It was about 11 minutes. Tell us more about how she chose to frame this defeat, reassure her supporters. What was the mood like for those who were watching?
Well, it was really significant, Savannah and Joe, that she delivered this speech at the site that she thought if she had won the election, she would be delivering her victory speech at Howard University, which is a sentimental, meaningful place for her as her alma mater that was meant to be a homecoming and then ended up being this place where she formally conceded the race. And she did talk about this in the context of not throwing up your hands, as you saw there, not despairing, but instead she urged her supporters and Americans to mobilize, to organize, and to try to think about how this next phase will really be about the Democratic messaging in contrast to what a Trump second presidency will look like. And she did want to thank her millions of supporters, but was very clear about this message we're going to hear from President Biden as well, that this should be a peaceful transfer of power, that they should accept the election results, and that it is time to move on. But her supporters who were assembled there, some of whom had been there the night before and were sent home, were very emotional, and it was clearly a very poignant moment and message from the vice president.
So, Monica, the current president, Joe Biden, also released a statement yesterday. We will hear from him a little later today. But so far, what are we hearing?
So he did say, and it's something he has said for months, that the best decision he ever made as president was selecting her as his running mate, as his partner in all of this. And he has said it was the first decision he made when he was seeking the nomination and got it in 2020, and, quote, "It was the best decision I made. Her story represents the best of America's story, and as she made clear today, I have no doubt that she'll continue writing that story." So we know that the president and the vice president did speak by phone yesterday, and the president congratulated her on, quote, her historic campaign. And of course, they still have a couple of key months here of governing in which they have hinted that they want to do a lot of the work, according to the Harris campaign, to shore up and try to protect some of the things that they put in place ahead of President-elect Trump taking office.
Monica, in that bit we played from the speech yesterday, we heard Harris mention this peaceful transfer of power. What are Biden administration officials telling you about how the transition is going to move forward? And also, are they going to try to get specific things done in the time they have left?
It does sound like that is their intention. And look, this is a legal process that is supposed to be carried out, the transition, and it's something that is really worked on in the minutes following a victory or a concession like what we saw yesterday. So we know that, for instance, the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, reached out to the people who are leading the Trump transition team right now to try to get some of these logistics going. And we know that for their part, the Trump campaign and transition confirmed that this took place and that during this phone call between President-elect Trump and President Biden, they committed to this transition and this peaceful transfer of power. And the other piece to all of this is that traditionally, when this happens, the president, the sitting president, invites the winner to the White House. So we know President Biden has invited Donald Trump, and it sounds like he has accepted that invitation. And so he may be coming here to Washington in the next couple of days. And this is, again, part of trying to have a, quote, what you see up there, smooth transition. And 8 years ago, this is something that then President Obama did. He invited Donald Trump. He came. But remember, guys, in 2020, that did not take place. There was not a, quote unquote, peaceful transfer of power. Instead, Donald Trump, when he lost, refused to accept the election results. So today, President Biden is really going to try to lean into restoring that tone and that contrast with 2020 to say that he wants everything to go as normally and traditionally as possible this time around. Savannah and Joe.
All right, Monica, Alba, thank you very much.
To help us unpack this election, and there are many boxes still left to unpack, let's bring in NBC News senior national reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good to have you with us. So let's start by taking a closer look at President-elect Trump's victory. We are still waiting on the results from Nevada and Arizona, but so far he's flipped 4 states, including the entire blue wall in the Midwest, every brick of that wall. How is he able to do it?
It's a great question, Joe, and good morning to you, Savannah. Nice to see you remotely after spending some time with you on set this week. Joe back in his traditional chair there after his trip to Wisconsin. I think, number one, I would just say, if you look across the board, you see Donald Trump having improved his performance sort of all over the place, whether you're talking about geographically or for most of the demographics, not all of the demographics. But overall, we're likely to see that this campaign had fewer overall voters, and Trump's share of those voters shot up. And so particularly what I would say is in rural areas and counties across the country, you saw an uptick for him. But the most glaring, of course, on a percentage basis difference was what you saw him do with Latino voters, and particularly with Latino men. Latino men have long favored Democratic candidates. Donald Trump won 55% of them. Latino voters overall, you saw Trump lose them overall. He lost Latino women, but his percentage of the Latino vote, 45%, is the highest in memory for a Republican candidate. So a lot going on there, and of course a little bit of an uptick also with African Americans.
John, it was so great to have you with us, and we appreciated you spending 4 live hours across the morning with us. Let's talk now on the Democratic side. After a loss, some finger-pointing starts, a blame game, sort of, and a lot happened here for Democrats that was objectively not good news. I mean, they lost support among a lot of key demographics, a lot of key voting groups. They also lost control of the Senate. Where does the Democratic Party go from here? What happens next as they try to find a path forward?
Yes, Savannah, I think what you're getting at there is a total butt kicking. And so, where they go is to lick their wounds a little bit and try to process what it is that they didn't do right. Now, in historical context, you look at this election and say, in the recent elections, you're talking about a significant shift, a decisive victory for Donald Trump. In the broader history of elections, we still have pretty tight, closely contested elections, even this one. where the battlegrounds will, 4 of them have already gone to Trump. Could be that he ends up getting all 7 of them, but by relatively thin margins, a couple points here, a couple points there. And so, I think what the Democrats are going to try to do, should probably try to do, is figure out why their message isn't resonating, not just to get them to the 50% level in these swing states, but what is it that they can do to really appeal to Americans more broadly and try to get a more lasting majority the next time they have the presidency, the next time they have the Senate. And of course, the House hasn't been called yet, but they are, facing an uphill battle to get the House right now.
So, John, there are still votes being counted out there, especially out west where mail-in voting is a big deal. So it'll get some time before we get to the final total. But you mentioned this. So far, it appears far fewer people voted in this election by millions and millions. Let's look at the latest total. Vice President Harris has more than 67 million votes. That is down from the 81 million who voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Even former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, he's not quite at the numbers he reached 4 years ago when he lost. We'll see if he ends up there. What should we read into that?
It's a great question, Joe, and I think political scientists will be looking at it over the course of the next couple of years, like sort of all the reasons. My hypothesis, my biggest hypothesis is sort of two-pronged. One is the last time we had an election in 2020, there was a massive increase in voting from 2016. And so, I don't think we should have expected that we were going to see the same kind of turnout. You saw, I think the Democrats got a 24% increase in their raw vote total from 2016 to 2020. The Republicans was more like 17%. You never see anything like that. So why did that happen back then? I think for the most part, because people didn't have anything else to do. Everybody was sitting at home. People were angry about the pandemic, whether they were angry about, people dying or the economy shutting down or both of those things. There was a lot of anger in the electorate, a lot of pent-up anger, and there weren't a lot of things for people to do. There was a facility of voting in terms of the ability to vote early, vote by mail. And I think in this election, number one, you didn't have those factors. And number two, people are sick of these political parties. There's a lot of anger in the country about that. And so I think some voters who voted last time thinking that they might make some sort of permanent or lasting change had gotten fed up with it by the time this election rolled around.
John Allen, thank you so much. Great to see you again. Well, NBC News projected early Wednesday that Republicans have taken control of the Senate. Wins in West Virginia and Ohio propelled the GOP to majority control.
Democrats previously held a slim majority in the Senate and are looking to add to their House caucus with dozens of key races still up in the air. That means who controls the Speaker's chair in the House still hangs in the balance.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. She's at the big board because she's multi-talented. She's going to work it for us. Ali, great to have you with us here in New York. So tell us about these key races for Republicans that gave them control here. Walk us through the path.
Look, several key races here, and it's exactly as Republican operatives told me they thought it was going to go, in large part because the states that they were looking at were out here in Montana, but also in Ohio, and those were going to be the ones, and then West Virginia down here. West Virginia was sort of an obvious pick once Senator Joe Manchin left his post there. All 3 of these contests I covered back in 2018, and I can tell you, the personality and the profile that these politicians cut in their home state sort of allowed them to defy the pro-Trump trend that was happening on the ground in presidential years. But it's different when you're running in an off cycle versus one where you're sharing the ballot with former President Trump. That's ultimately the thing that felled each of these states and allowed them to flip into the Republican column, thusly turning over control of the Senate to Republicans. I do want to point out to you, though, these 2 states out here have a really interesting thing happening in them where both Democrats are trying to defend their seats. In the case of Senator Jackie Rosen, she is the incumbent serving there. Just look at Washoe County. This is a place where Jackie Rosen was able to survive, but President Trump was able to flip. It does sort of give a little context to the idea that although the ticket splitters didn't come out in Ohio or Montana where we knew they needed to, they might have come out there, and they also might have come out in Arizona, where you see Maricopa County, the one that we often talk about all the time. Trump won by 51%, but Ruben Gallego, who is the House member that is now competing for this once Democratic-held seat, actually was able to hold Maricopa County himself. This could be a story of ticket splitting, maybe not in the places that Democrats needed it, but also in the places that they want it to hold their majorities to a less extreme level in the Senate.
Yeah, and Allie, maybe this is a good time to ask you about that. We know Republicans will have control of the Senate, but these last few states that we're waiting on, why are they such a big deal? How big that majority is? Talk about why that could matter.
It's for exactly that reason, because you have people in these states that can continue to fill Democratic seats. Look, Democrats always knew that they were likely to lose the majority this time, but it does make it that maybe there are potentials for bipartisanship if the majorities are a little bit closer, or it could just mean that we're in for more divided government, especially when we get to talking about what's happening in the House. God, we all need some sleep, but that is going to make this an even more interesting case of Congress in Washington.
So let's talk about the House. Unclear which party is going to be in control as votes are still counted. We don't know when it will come in, but what are we watching? And what do you think about how soon we could expect a result?
We don't know when it's going to come in, especially because you see some of these places. Alaska is one that I often talk about. A lot of people vote by mail there, and there is a really hot marquee contest there where the Democrat is defending her seat against a Republican challenger. I was looking at these races yesterday as some key bellwethers that I was watching. When I left yesterday at around 6 o'clock, they weren't called. I opened up the board this morning before talking to you guys. Still not called. One that I was very eager to check, though, was this one in Iowa. A lot of attention paid to Iowa because of a poll that showed maybe Democrats were gaining traction there. Obviously, that did not ultimately happen. But this is a seat that Republicans knew they were going to have to play defense on. And it's had one of the tightest margins in House races that I've been watching over the course of the last few days. The Republican, Marionette Miller Meeks, could be in trouble, or she could just squeak out with 799 votes, 99% of the vote total there. We're going to see what ends up happening. We also used to talk about the road to the majority going through New York. Looks like it might be able to go through New York still for Republicans, especially when you see in places like New York's 19th congressional district, if Mark Molinaro and if Anthony D'Esposito on Long Island are able to hold on, then that would be a good sign for Republicans. Alternatively, 92% of the vote in this Long Island district, Laura Gillen, the Democratic challenger, is leading at this point. And then you flip over into the Hudson Valley, you see the Democratic challenger also leading there. But it's a longer road for the rest of these races to ultimately be called. Pennsylvania's 10th congressional district, for example, was one that Republicans were a little bit worried about. Scott Perry, one of the former heads of the rabble-rousing Freedom Caucus, so we talk about and follow him around the Hill a lot. He was in a closer race than expected, but it's looking like he, with 99% of the vote, might still squeak it out. I think the reality here is Democrats needed to flip 4 seats. They didn't ultimately end up being able to do that. Still some races outstanding, but it's going to be a really tough order for Democrats to take control at this point.
Allie, I know you have to go home to keep covering all this stuff, which is happening on Capitol Hill, but it's so fun to have you in New York.
I know, I've loved this.
But go cover the rabble-rousing for us.
Yeah, exactly.
The rabble-rousing needs to be over.
Thank you, Allie. All right, stock markets surge on the news of Mr. Trump's victory, closing sharply higher on Wednesday.
Yeah, the Dow Jones logged its best day in 2 years, while the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ also hit record highs. This morning, U.S. markets are set to open slightly higher as investors await the latest interest rate decision from the Federal Reserve.
Joining us now to talk about all this, Investopedia's editor-in-chief, Caleb Silver. Caleb, good to have you with us. So these are astronomical numbers. The markets were already riding high. So why did Wall Street react so positively to this election result? How much of it is we had uncertainty, now we have certainty? How much of it is Trump won?
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. This didn't drag on for days or weeks, and having that certainty of knowing who's going to be in the White House and what the makeup, at least of the Senate, looks like, has been a pretty bullish signal for a lot of investors. And part of that is because of the promises that Trump made throughout his campaign, which is extending those tax cuts from 2017. Remember, that lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. He intends to keep it there, maybe even take it lower. He's promised lower taxes for some companies. There's that, of course. There's a lot of spending being talked about through his administration, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's for defense, whether that's for deportation. So government spending also pretty bullish for stocks and for companies. But also, if you think about some of these other policies, making things in America, how he's going to maybe undo the CHIPS Act, maybe reform the Securities and Exchange Commission, less regulation. All of that is bullish signals for investors who are looking for clarity. They have it now.
We know the economy was a top issue for voters in this election. We heard it time and time again in polls in the recent future, in the not so recent future, in the recent past and the not so recent past. Among his proposals, Mr. Trump talked a lot about tax cuts, and we also have heard a lot about tariffs on imported goods. Tell us about his plans, how they might impact the consumer, and when anything like that could start to happen once he takes office.
Well, Trump has talked about imposing a 20% across-the-board tariff as soon as he takes office. That is inflationary by nature. Why? Because we will end up paying for that as consumers. Those costs get passed on to us as consumers, and it's tough for businesses that are importing products from overseas to make their finished product to sell to us. Those costs ultimately gets passed on to consumers. That's going to actually be inflationary by nature. On the other hand, you get tax cuts. It's not just the corporate tax rate. It's extending the 2017 tax cuts, and he's talking about even more tax cuts, potentially extending or raising the child tax credit, talking about tax breaks for people at different income things. So you pick your poison here: higher tariffs or lower taxes. He and his administration are betting on lower taxes are going to keep the economy growing. But all of that is going to weigh on consumers because we still have inflation. Even though it's come down and it's slowed, it's still going to be a factor.
Okay, so Caleb, do your magic trick. How long until the Fed meeting?
That's what I called it.
Oh, come on. This is an easy one, 6 hours and 41 minutes. But it's the one in December, about 40 days, 6 hours and 41 minutes that we care about. The Fed is going to decide on interest rates today. They are most likely going to lower rates a quarter point. It's the future we care about, but the future is so uncertain because we know Trump has talked about putting the Federal Reserve underneath the executive branch. That could change the equation very much, and a lot of his policies may change the Fed's equations for what they intend to do in the future.
We call it magic. You call it math. So, Caleb Silver, thank you so much.
By the way, Brian Chung, when he was with him, admitted he can't do that. So it really is something special.
I bet there's a thing on the internet that makes that not possible. Anyway, or just ask Caleb.
Count his skills.
Or just ask Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb. All right, let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather: a fast-moving wildfire in Southern California is actually forcing thousands to flee.
Yeah, serious story there. Meteorologist Angie Lastman is here with the latest on that and the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. Yes, you're exactly right. Parts of Southern California dealing with this fire weather and the potential for that fire to spread through the day. So let me run you through. We've got 25 million people at risk with these red flag warnings up for much of Southern California, including Los Angeles and San Diego, as well as Santa Cruz, stretching up into San Francisco and points north. So it's not just Southern California, it's Central California too, but we are closely watching this mountain fire that we're seeing. This is one of those fast-moving fires that we've seen over the past 24 hours. 14,000 acres right now, 0% contained. You can see it's just north of Camarillo. This is going to be something we watch through the day to potentially worsen, and here's why. We've got these really strong Santa Ana winds. We're talking 60, 70, 75 plus mile per hour winds. A really aggressive Santa Ana wind event happening across this region, but we've also got very low humidity. So we know the conditions are dry. We know the winds are strong. It doesn't take much to see these fires start and then explosively spread, which is exactly what we saw yesterday. This is going to be something we will continue to watch through the day today and potentially into the next couple of days as firefighters continue to try to get this thing contained. Meanwhile, we've got a winter storm that's working across parts of the Rockies. We've got the winter alerts to prove it, and plenty of snow is expected across this region. Notice the heavy snow that's really draped for the southern and central Rockies. That's where we could potentially pick up maybe a foot or so. But also the other side of this system is rain. And this is going to be across specifically places like West Texas, where we could see some of those stronger storms today. But also we're going to see the potential for some heavy rain. Here's what we're looking for as far as the severe threat: Midland to San Angelo down to Del Rio. The potential for hail and strong wind gusts is there, but of course we can't rule out a couple of tornadoes here as the day goes on. As we get into tomorrow, the heavy rain threat shifts north. This is still going to be snow that we deal with across parts of Colorado, but we'll see this heavy kind of rain stretched across the plains here as we get through the day tomorrow. And last but of course not least, there's a lot going on weather-wise. We've got the southeast dealing with flood alerts as more of that heavy rain works across the southeast, guys, through the day today. Unfortunately, for the northeast, we really need some rain, but there is none in sight for the short term.
It's too hot here.
Too hot, and the fire weather is a concern as well. So we'll keep that trend going at least for another couple days.
All right, thank you, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.